Police in Mexico saying that they bagged a brutal kingpin in the war on drugs. Sunday, they arrested Jesus Enrique Rejo Aguilar, founder of the ruthless Zetas drug gang. They say that he's connected to the attacks against U.S. ICE agents in February that killed Agent Jamie Zapata. Now, I mentioned this war on drugs. Did you realize that it has been 40 years since President Richard Nixon began that war? It's got to leave you asking, what have we been doing for the last 4 decades? Time magazine devoting its cover story, The War Next Door, and Tim Padgett wrote it. He's been covering Mexican drug wars for more than 20 years now. He joins me live from Miami. I guess, first of all, let me ask you about the latest news, Tim. Do you think the capture of the Zetas founder is going to make any type of impact at all?
Oh, I think it's a significant victory for the Mexican government. Rejon is one of the, as you mentioned, one of the founders of the Zetas. And when we talk about the cancer of drug violence in Mexico, the Zetas are really the most malignant cells, you could say. They are the most soulless killing machine amongst all the cartels in Mexico. They're former army commandos recruited about a decade ago by the Gulf cartel up in northeastern Mexico. And they are really the worst nightmare that Mexico's lawlessness could produce. They have no compunctions about killing not just rivals, but innocent civilians in this war, and also, as you mentioned, even U.S. agents like ICE agent Jaime Zapata back in February.
You know, and you point out in your article, in the last 5 years, 40,000 people have died in this war on drugs. You know, a war that was implemented, as I mentioned, 40 years ago. I mean, why has this war been such a failure, so ineffective?
Well, a large part of it is just that on the Mexican side anyway, is just the utter lack of credible police and judicial institutions. One of the things we wanted to do with this article was put more of a human face on the Mexican drug war tragedy. And that's important because as these drug cartels become more and more monstrously violent, as I mentioned, they're killing increasingly innocent people. But what that's doing is creating the emergence of victims groups, like the one led by the Mexican poet Javier Cecilia that we talk about in the story, whose son was killed by narcos. And those victims groups are beginning slowly but surely to put pressure on Mexican politicians to get more serious about the kind of police and judicial reforms that are really Mexico's only long-term solution to saving itself from this tragedy.
Tim, final point. I mean, and for years, and you've covered this too, the corruption within the police, the military, the politicians. I mean, that is also a fighting force in itself.
Oh, I mean, the big problem, look, the United States is to blame to a large extent for this tragedy because of our drug consumption and also because of the weapons that get smuggled from the United States into Mexico. But the largest part of the problem is the police corruption. Most of the police, and I hate to say this, but most of the police in Mexico are in some way in the pockets of the drug cartels. And until that's changed in Mexico, nothing's really going to change.
Well, your work hasn't changed, and for more than 20 years, you've been tackling this from every single angle possible. Tim, thanks so much for joining me today. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.